on live streaming everywhere we need to be live streaming. And thank you everybody for spreading the word about Tuesday Talks, especially all of you Tuesday Talk Premium schools and Tuesday Talk Partner schools. We're really grateful for you spreading the word. And this couldn't happen without all of your interest. So we're excited to be doing this. So, okay, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my friends. Well, they're going to introduce themselves. And we always have them say their name, what they do, maybe like how long you've been doing it, and one fun fact. Okay, so I kind of threw this on you. Most people know that I do this fun fact, but sometimes early in the morning we forget. So I'll start. My name is Gloria. I'm one of the co-founders at Initial View. My fun fact this week is that I am actually in Mississippi, which I rarely go to, but because one of my sons is a baseball player and he wanted to come to a special training facility to figure out how to throw faster. So that's my fun fact of the day. All right. Joe, you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hola a todos. My name is Joe Spirachani. I'm an assistant dean of admission and coordinator for international enrollment at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. I've been in the world of admission for about 4 years now, maybe 7 if you count my years as a student worker. A fun fact about me is I have an older brother, and we actually share the same birthday, even though we are 8 years apart. So we were both born on May 1st, 1990 and 1998. So that's my
Fun
fun fact.
fact. Awesome.
I'll pass it over to Jen.
Good morning. Evening. Sorry, I'm in the morning, very early mornings. So fun fact, I've been up since 4 a.m. It's great. I'm Jennifer Hirsch from Claremont McKenna College, Senior Associate Dean of International Admission. I've been in admissions in 2010, and I'll tie my fun fact to that. I've only worked at small liberal arts colleges, so this is my third. And I love it. It's a great type of institution to work for, and I've enjoyed every minute of the last 14 years. So Trey.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Trey Hammond, and I'm an admissions officer at Pomona College, also in Claremont, California, with Jen. I have worked at Pomona for the past couple of years, and similar to Joe, I was also in kind of like the office as a student working as an admissions, tour guide and head guide and that kind of thing. So it's kind of a continuation of my experience as a student, now working at Pomona. Happy to be here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Okay, and I realized that I forgot to start recording. Okay, let me go ahead and okay. So, as I am making, I apologize, everyone, because I'm in a different time zone. I got a little confused. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up these slides. If they will open for me, they might not. Sorry, friends.
There is something about this time of morning that is hard to find. So
Yeah, I'm
totally
here. I'm here. So sorry, everyone. Okay, we're gonna have our guests share a little bit about where they are working. And then we'll dive into the topic that you all want to talk about. So, Joe, why don't you start us off and tell
Yeah,
us a little
of
bit about
course.
Bates?
Thank you, Gloria. So this is a little slide about Bates. I don't want to go into every single detail that's in this slide, and you all can definitely read for yourselves. But as I mentioned, we are a small private liberal arts college located in Lewiston, Maine, also known as Vacation Land. If you don't know where Maine is, look at a map of the United States, and the northeasternmost state, that is Maine. We are perhaps in the southern area of Maine. So we are about 2 hours away from Boston. If you're thinking about our Canadian neighbors, we're about 4 hours away from Montreal, 5 hours away from Quebec City. We have about 2,000 students on our campus, and at Bates, since we are a residential college, we do have 4 years of guaranteed housing. We are a true liberal arts college, which means that we apply the standards of breadth and depth, making sure that you explore as wide as possible, but you also become the expert in your respective field at the end of the day. Before, beyond going into more numbers and data facts that, again, you can definitely see, I just want to guide you all to the 3 pictures on the right side of the screen, which are sort of like 3 traditions or 3 moments that are emblematic of every student's experience here at Bates. The first one being on the top right, being your first week of orientation here, where you will embark in your ASUP trip, which is your annual entering student orientation program. A 3-day program designed for students to explore the beauty of the outdoors in Maine, and really engage with your fellow first years. You'll go through from that moment all the way to one of the most emblematic bookends of your time at Bates is going to be your senior thesis. Bates is one of only 12 colleges that requires every student to do a senior thesis, and so this picture in the middle is just kind of it's an example of students celebrating the accomplishments of their thesis. Lastly, in the bottom right corner is one of our most famous traditions, which is the puddle jump. Yes, Bates has beautiful weather. At some points it's sunny, some points it's snowy. And in the winter months, students embrace that winter weather by jumping into the freezing waters of our own Lake Andrews in what is known as the puddle jump. So you can contact me for more information about Bates. We're not here to talk about Bates, but I'm excited to be with you all today. Thank you all.
All right, so moving all the way west, probably in the furthest corner west of Bates, we have Claremont McKenna College, and next up, Pomona College, but in Southern California. So you could see, it's a little blurry, but a little graphic of the Claremont colleges. So Claremont McKenna College is one of 5 small liberal arts colleges, a part of the Claremont Colleges Consortium. This group of schools has a few things in common, mainly being we're all small liberal arts institutions, small residential communities. So Claremont McKenna College, in the context of the Claremont colleges, was the 3rd founded. So we're the middle child of the group. But our mission is to prepare students for lives of responsible leadership in business, government, and the professions. So with that distinct mission, we do things very much tied to promoting responsible leadership within our student experience. So encouraging students to take on leadership roles within the community, and also to channel their energies into career exploration and development throughout their whole time at CMC. So really encouraging students to think about how their CMC education will set them, and experiences within the community will set them up for leadership positions in their professional paths. Our tradition is really rooted in economics and government and public policy. Very specifically, it's tied to our founding, which I won't jump into at the moment. But over the decades that we've been around, it has expanded greatly into disciplines beyond economics and government. And so our students are going into all professions that you can think of. And within that context of our mission, we do all of this within the foundation of a traditional liberal arts experience. So the small class sizes, the intimate setting, a breadth and depth of knowledge across the humanities, social sciences, and the sciences. And encouraging students to really invest their time and energies into research outside of the classroom, internships over the summer, clubs and organizations within the semesters, and really understanding their own leadership style and how that connects to their academic interests and ultimately to their career paths moving beyond CMC. So that's a little snapshot along with a few data points here, and my contact information for future information, and I'll pass it on to Trey.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. again, I'm Trey, and I'm representing Pomona College today. As you may have seen on the previous slide, next door neighbor to Claremont McKenna. And just to kind of like add on with a bit more general info about the Claremont colleges or the Claremont Consortium, in case you haven't heard of them before, one of the special things about us is that even though each school has its own unique identity and vibe, which we might talk about a little bit later, having, those small classroom sizes, having small student populations of anywhere from 900 to, in Pomona's case, with the most students, almost 1,800. You'll find there's a lot of cross-campus collaboration. At the end of the day, it really feels like a mid-sized institution of about 6,000 students, even though you're attending your own institution within the five. And we're the first intentional consortium within the US. And so being built right across the street from each other was completely intentional so that we can take classes at any of the five schools and be able to eat at any of the 7 dining halls and 10 different eateries, apart from those dining halls on our campus. And so that also kind of reflects on student life at the campus, where there are over 250 plus different clubs and organizations that you can choose from. And so it's a really special little community where I encourage you, to look at the broad spectrum of all five. But for Pomona's case in particular, similar to CMC, we do have small class sizes of 13, an 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio. And as you can see, anywhere from like 12 to 14% of our students are international students. Like the others, you can see we have do have some testing that you can look at there in terms of how we, I guess, proceed in that case. One thing that I will note is that as of last fall, Pomona went permanently test optional. And so when it comes to SAT or ACT, totally optional in that space. In case you're looking at the majors and minors in the bottom left corner there, we do offer 48 majors that you can choose from and have funding kind of in all those departments. When it comes to Pomona and the way you want to think about it, we were created with the idea of having that like East Coast liberal arts experience on the West Coast. So having that kind of like, true liberal arts experience, finding a lot of joy in the pursuit of learning and having a real breadth and depth to your experience is what Pomona is all about. And with that, I will pass it along.
All right. Okay, so we're going to dive in to kind of the topic. But before we do that, I wanted to see who is here. So you should see a little poll pop up on your Zoom if you are on Zoom. And if you're on a live stream, you can just type in the chat and then people can, my team can tell me that if you're a student, a parent, a counselor, or other, and if you are a student, or if you're representing a student here, what grade you are in. And it looks like that we have mostly, let's see. We have a good mix, guys. We have a third of students, a third of parents, and a third of counselors. And we have majority class of 2025. So juniors currently looking at building a class. So we've got a couple seniors here that are like thinking about what, wanting to think about their options. So I'm going to give it like pretty good. We've had 75% participation. One more minute or 30 seconds, last chance to answer the poll. All right. All right, great. So we actually have more counselors than any other group. So counselors, if you want to like contribute to the chat, you're welcome to. I think somebody's telling me that the chat is disabled, but I think you all can chat to us. It should be, let's see, can you? Let me just double check that. Yes, you can chat to us now. Perfect. So if you want to contribute to the conversation, feel free to chat to us. Us panelists will see it and we will continue the dialogue. Okay, so we wanted to start off with this screenshot that just happens to be on CMC's website somewhere, and talk a little bit about how, just talk philosophically. Rankings are hard. Rankings are necessary in some aspect of our world. But I think we are, in our conversation with each other, we're realizing that the measuring of what we're trying to measure is difficult. Now, one of the wonderful, unique things about US higher ed is that It is a holistic system. So when we talk about what is important to us, we're talking about things that are very measurable, and then we're talking about things that are kind of not measurable. I mean, that's the thing. That's my whole slogan at Initial View is life is not a test, it's a conversation. And part of that is because we realize that numbers and rankings don't always measure what we are hoping for and looking for in relationship, in experience, and whatnot. So I just put this out there for you all to kind of take a look at, and how, yes, we understand that rankings matter on some level in terms of helping you know what's available, helping you know what could be important to you. But sometimes the methodology for how these rankings come to be are actually not in line with what you're looking for at all. And they're not adequate. At the end of the day, they're just not, they're not adequate. So we want to have a thoughtful conversation of how to kind of consider it. So, and we will say, I asked my friends here, I was like, did you think about rankings when you were applying? And I'll let them share a little bit about that. And I think we all kind of had a very different experience in our own journey of looking for colleges, and want to just share that with you so that you kind of understand how the range, people might be telling you a certain thing. You might be feeling a certain thing around the people you are with, but the range of experience in terms of finding the best fit for you is going to be different, and we should embrace that. So Jen, do you want to start? Give us a quick overview.
Yes. So I can start by giving you my answer of it by how my experience with rankings. My experience with rankings started mostly when I worked with international students. To be very honest, I grew up in California. I applied to only California schools and went to California schools. And I had an amazing experience, and I wouldn't change it. But rankings were not something that my parents were very familiar with. So I wasn't familiar with it. And so I don't have like a personal student, like as a student experience with rankings. Going into working at selected liberal arts colleges, because all the schools I worked at are were and continue to be highly selective. And that definitely became a part of the conversation. But as I moved more into working with students around the world, that's where the questions became more prominent and around the ranking of the institution that I worked at and what they meant, and really understanding that that the rankings that were out there in the world about colleges and universities influenced or guided college lists and search processes. So as I've gotten to know them better and a better understanding, I think one of the things that's important to know, especially about the U.S. colleges and universities, that there is no universally accepted definitive list of U.S. Top colleges and universities. We were chatting before about probably the confusion around U.S. News and World Report. It feels very official. It's not official. It's not something that you're not going to find a list that all colleges are going to be promoting or saying this reflects exactly who we are. So knowing that context, I think, is important in using rankings in a way that will be maybe important in your context, which would look completely different from the way another student or your peer is going to be using a ranking system. And then along with that, probably very obviously, then there is no, universally accepted best college and best college in each category. I think you can make arguments for lots of institutions that could be at various points on rankings, or, would be important to certain students in different ways, but then that same institution is not going to be considered a school of high importance for the next student. In addition to that, sort of not government funded, none of the rankings lists are funded by the U.S. government. Data is pulled from, various places around. Some of the data is stuff that institutions provide the federal government that is publicly available. But as we'll talk about in another slide, like the way things are used is very different. So The determining factors of rankings, I think this is something that if you haven't dove into various ranking systems or lists, the way in which they're measured and the criteria used are going to be very different. And I did a little bit of a dive in preparation for this and realized some of the things that are used was not something that I talk about on a daily basis, not questions I get about from students, and not something that is generally and usually not criteria points that students are or parents are particularly interested or even on top of mind. And then also understanding like how much weight is do those various points play in the rankings process. That was enlightening as I sort of went through and realized, certain things were given a lot more weight than I would have understood. And some things like class size and experience in the classroom have been removed from some ranking systems at various points. So, the things that we talk about as institutions as being important to our experience may not at all be reflected in a ranking system, or may be very, little reflected in that ranking system. So it is going to, like everything in the college admission process, and totally depend on what's important to you, and how you use the information you're given.
I'm gonna ask real quick, and I might stop sharing this just so that I can see all his faces. So obviously, you talked about these criteria, Jen, and what are, just for people who haven't looked at the criteria at all, do you have kind of a list in mind, or just kind of throw out some that you were like, yep, I don't even know this about our institution?
I did take a couple notes on the US World rankings because they actually switched their criteria or made some adjustments to their criteria from 2023 to 2024 rankings. And so even that, if you're looking at historic, rankings lists, that's important to know that the criteria may not always be the same from one year to the other. And when I looked at the US World and rankings, there was the things that were removed that I think was shocking to me and potentially to my peers here: class size, terminal degrees of faculty, things that we feel are very important to the student experience at a liberal arts college, were actually taken out of that ranking system, being added criteria at all, from 23 to 24. There was the things added, which I think are important, but it depends on, what's important to you, is first generation to college student graduation rate and performance, postgraduate earning. That one is really important, I guess. Citations per publication, meaning I think faculty. So things that are, I think at face value can feel important, but what does that actually mean for the students using the rankings? What does that criteria mean? Like I think the citation is really important as well, because for small liberal arts college, when you think about, well, what is that end point is really interesting and possibly important, but what led up to that? What students were involved? What kind of research? Is it focused in one area? Is it offset by their econ? It's like all in on research, but other departments are not. So there's so many nuances to that data point by institution. And the thing in the US News that made that's the highest, 20% of the ranking is based on peer assessment. I didn't do a deep dive exactly what that means, but that feels a bit subjective. So that was telling.
Well, Joe, when we were having this conversation, you gave a fun example of how this kind of peer assessment could be skewed. So can you share about
I mean, and with peer assessment, it really depends on usually, for example, rankings as well, take the input of students. But perhaps the students who are filling out those rankings are the most motivated to talk greatly about their school, right? Usually students are disengaged with the college that they're going to. They're likely not going to be filling out these ranking surveys and whatnot. So it becomes a kind of a vicious cycle. So one of the rankings that, Bates doesn't really care by and large about rankings too much. But if we were to care about rankings, we would say that we have the seventh best dining center in the country, at least ranked by several sources, right? And that's kind of like a chip on our shoulder that we're definitely proud to wear. And I was talking to one of the students who's a first year, who I was able to connect with when he was a prospective student, and talk about sort of dining at Bates, because I was excited to hear, what he has to say about dining. And I said, so how do you like the food in Commons, which is our dining center? And he said, I actually don't like it at all. And I said, oh, tell me more. Since again, we have the seventh best dining center in the country. He said, well, I just feel like I want to eat chicken nuggets all day and every day. And the Commons does not offer that, right? They offer a great, they say, like I kept hearing about this vegan food and vegan bar and organic food and yada yada. And I just want to eat college food like a college kid. I think I had different ideas of what college food meant when I was in college, but definitely understood that he thought about college food as, let's have pizza, let's have burgers, let's have nuggets, let's have fries, let's just get fast food and just go on with life, without thinking about the dining experience as like, oh, let me get vegan pad thai, right? And that sort of like was enlightening to me to hear, like what we thought of as an objective fact of like, yes, we have 30% of our food systems come from organic local farms, and we make the best to make vegan options and alternative options like accessible to our students. That might not be what students are looking for, right? And I think it gets to the point of it being also a very individualized experience, right? What rankings tell you is what perhaps the overall arching theme of what people think of a college. But at the end of the day, what you like and what you don't like will impact your own experience, right? And will perhaps be in disaccordance with what the rankings say as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously like I invited 3 liberal arts colleges, and they are on a different list than the national universities list of US News and World Report. So they're gonna have a different view. But like when we talk about rankings, I'm sure many of you have looked at, I hope that many of you have looked at more than the US News and World Report. There are many out there, and there are things that there are lists, there are even rankings out there that are like rankings of like campus life, just about the campus life and things like that. So you can really search for certain criteria that matter to you. One of the interesting things that I looked at when I was looking at like QS is kind of popular when we're talking internationally. And, there are parts of that, like obviously 40% is academics. Great. Like I think many of you are worried about academics. I will just say that on most of these lists, if you look kind of in the top 100, you're in the range of like, okay, really great academics. Even top 200, you're still in the range of really great academics. So there are some other things. I talked to another larger university recently, and they were like, honestly, we put the data in wrong, and they were like, we didn't realize that our data person gave the wrong data to the US News. Like, and that impacted our ranking because they were talking about basically how they have a certain student faculty ratio on campus, but they actually offer many programs like in different locations and online, and all of that data got thrown in. And so their student to faculty ratio, while small, actually ended up being large because they had these like thousands of people online classes, and somehow the data went in weirdly. And that actually dropped them a couple numbers, and so but they like afterwards were like, how did we drop? And when they did the analysis, they realized like, oh, whoops, we gave the wrong data. So there's a lot of things that can happen in the rankings methodology that we don't see as a whole, which is why looking at multiple ones of them might be important. But at the end of the day, many of those things, like citations of publications, I mean, you want top research. I get it. Like you want to have leading people providing you with the academics. But some of the most brilliant researchers are actually terrible teachers. Like I'll just say that, as a college student once myself, remembering being like, okay, this person is like world renowned, and I am not learning anything from him. Like, I'm really having trouble. And so those kinds of things are like hard to like match up, right? Because somebody is telling you this is the most, the best, the whatnot, but you're not vibing with that. That's a question that you want to ask.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts on kind of why we look at the rankings?
I can touch on it a little bit. I think in talking about different ranking sources, that touches a little bit on, I guess, my ranking story a little bit, which I'll touch on for just a second. Um, so for me, like, I think that I think that I definitely led with trying to understand like the values of what I wanted out of my college experience. And while at first I was definitely more attached to, big names that I'd heard of in the past and that kind of thing, as I moved into like the summer before my senior year, I started thinking more seriously about the idea that I wanted like, small classroom sizes, and I wanted a liberal arts experience where I could, explore a lot of different disciplines so I could be sure of where I ended up. And financial aid was something that was important to me. I was thinking about even like the weather and kind of like the
Mhm.
the welcoming nature of the students. Sometimes um I think about the vibe of a campus and its classroom setting in terms of a competitive or collaborative experience where some students can thrive in the competition setting, and for me I was looking for more of a collaborative space. And so that's sort of how I ended up only applying to small liberal arts schools. The way rankings came in for me was honestly, you know, eventually being lucky to get into Pomona, but finding that, maybe this is true for some of you who are attending right now. Maybe you've never heard of Pomona before, right?
Mhm.
Or maybe my parents hadn't heard of Pomona before, or maybe, my friends hadn't heard of Pomona before. But I could go to a rankings list and be like, look, it's real, it does good things, and it was just funny, after choosing Pomona at the end of the day to see on my social media that my dad was posting on Facebook about how I got into this school that was ranked at this on like the Forbes, on the Forbes list that year. And so, it's I think that there are ways that it can be helpful. And one of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat to us that I'm not sure everyone can see, that first one says, does ranking mean anything to us? How do we use it? And I wanted to first thank you for asking the question, and second also give appreciation to the way you phrased the question, which is something that I definitely wanted to touch on today, about asking how do we use rankings, because I think that something that I heard from another colleague in the profession, that really stuck with me was kind of using rankings as a tool rather than kind of like a replacement for your own critical thinking about your college experience. And so I think that for Maryland here, really leading with what values you have, what you think excellence looks like for you in a college setting, what you think excellence looks like for whatever 4-year experience you're looking for, in your next chapter, I think is where you can lead. So some students, don't really care about whether or how pretty a campus is, so you can ignore those rankings lists, but you can pay more attention to, if you were someone like, looking for a great dining experience, you would see Bates is number 7 on that list, right? And then there are lots of different ways that you can go about it. But that's the brief bit I'll touch on there, and allow us to go to the next point here.
I mean, Trey mentioned a lot of things on this slide, and I just think yes, it's a good starting point, especially if you are new to US. We're talking specifically about US right now because these are US institutions. And if you've never been to the US and you're just starting and you have no idea, and you've heard from somewhere that there are 4,000 institutions, and like, how do I even begin? Yes, like looking at our rankings to determine like, okay, these are kind of the top. But again, it's not just top 5, it's not just top 10. Like there are so many institutions that have the same kind of caliber of education. You're going to get an amazing education at many, many, many institutions. But you can only go to one. Yeah, you can only go to one. And so it is it is important to have some kind of place to start to think about how to filter. Now, you will notice that in the top 50 of any of these lists, if you kind of like start to think about just size, then you're like, oh, there's a lot of difference here. Location. I mean, I've got someone from this corner of the US and this corner of the US. It is so different location wise, and the feeling is going to be different. The majors that are offered, there are some schools that only have 35 majors and some that have 100, plus majors. And like that might matter to you depending on what interest you have. So that's when you want to start to filter out. I would encourage you all, if you haven't done this, like we don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of the actual rankings of every possible rankings list there is out there. But if you kind of do your own little sleuthing, like your own little research, and kind of figure out like, okay, how do they get this information? Where does this data come from? All of this, a lot of it is based on reputation from who? Reputation from faculty, reputation from peers, the students, like who is filling out these surveys. And you might realize like, oh goodness. Okay, so we were talking a little bit about restaurants, for example. Like when you're looking for a good restaurant, like how do you go find a good restaurant?
You go to Yelp, maybe.
Yeah,
you go to Yelp.
Yeah.
What does everyone else like?
I don't know. What's the equivalent in other countries? Zomato or
even just Google reviews, like
yeah.
DMPing, I feel like, and so you're basically looking at like these rank review places. And you don't necessarily want to go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because you don't know where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is coming from unless you're just like, oh, based on the number of people who have gone there. And so anyway, like if you can kind of think about the college rankings the same way that you think about going to a good restaurant, obviously you're spending a lot more money and it's a bigger investment. But if you kind of start thinking about that way, the relevancy of the ranking is going to be impacted, right? Because you yourself, I hate spicy food. So even though this place is ranked number 1, but all the things on the menu are spicy, I'm not going to be able to be happy there. Like I'm going to be crying. My tongue is going to, think about it. Like you have to kind of think about it that way a little bit. It's a very derivative thing that I'm saying here right now, but so I'm going to put a poll up real quick and ask you all what matters to you. If I can get this. Okay. Do you see it, guys?
Yes.
Okay. These are just some of the things. And if you see something that matters to you, don't see the thing that actually matters to you, type it in the chat because I'd love to know what other factors you're thinking about when you are thinking about a college.
And while they're voting, I'd love to just kind of like add into sort of like what also Trey said earlier, that uses as a tool, right? Use rankings as a tool, but perhaps not as the guiding factor as how do you decide on a college, right? Because it can get so overwhelming if you let other people decide for you, right? And let outside sources decide for you. So another, I definitely did a deep dive on Bates rankings and different sites because I was like, I don't know what else are we ranked besides like liberal arts in general and like academics in general. I'm like, what are the random rankings out there? And I found out, which I don't know if this is something that I should be publicizing out loud or not, is that Bates was ranked 643rd in top party school in the United States. And either we love that because it lets you know that you're not going to be coming to a party school, or we hate that because people think that you're not going to have fun, right? But I think it's by matter of being a small liberal arts college located in a not so big city that just makes you feel like you're just going to have more of like a nice campus experience, and you're still going to have fun, but definitely not the stereotypical party school vibe that you've probably seen in the movies, right? And I think, I got there and I was like, first of all, how do you rank between the 642nd to the 643rd? Like, how do you make that ranking that long? And secondly, like, why do we feel like every single aspect of your experience needs to be a ranking, right? And why do we feel like every single like quality of your education needs to be like in the top 10, right? Because we know that life is not perfect, and we know that life has a lot of highs and a lot of lows, right? So embracing the fact that it's not going to be perfect and college is going to be an experience of highs and lows, and that you can also have your own fun and you can also be successful in your own way, so long as you let yourself be successful and you put yourself in the driver's seat. I think that's why we say that rankings can be a tool, right? Because it can still help you feel empowered by the choices that you're making, but don't let them choose for you.
Yeah, and I think just briefly adding on to that, one of the things that I like to say sometimes about rankings is that it can be interesting to challenge yourself to start in like the middle or even like the bottom of a list and go up. Um, just because kind of like, starting from top down can kind of get you in the wrong mindset that it's getting worse as you go, which I don't think is necessarily true, as we've been alluding to. I will admit, I don't think that's exactly the way I'd go about it if I were looking up, restaurants. Probably wouldn't go to number 50 before checking out number one. But I do think that in the case of colleges and universities, it can be helpful. To be able to kind of see, you can kind of, through the different descriptions of each, the way the rankings describe each college or the way that this college was ranked at this point, you can kind of get a sense of what matters to this, specific ranking site without actually having to dig deep into, the percentages and all that. And I think that seeing one of the questions in the chat, how can counselors use those ranking data? How can you use the ranking data? I think that it can help in familiarizing yourself with a wider range of college and university experiences for your student, because especially in the space that we're all in, being highly selective institutions, while there are ways that we can all talk about for a long time, I'm sure, about how students can be more competitive in our processes, there are definitely no guarantees. And so being able to give a selection of colleges that all represent the students' values and can also, be shown to parents in a way that is digestible in the form of rankings, is a way to use the rankings as a resource that can be helpful on that side of the desk. But I can pass it along to anybody else who has any thoughts on that.
I had thoughts on the poll results when.
Yeah, go, Jen.
Okay. I love them. I love the poll results, but I also was like my colleagues here, like Joe, I was doing a deep dive on where CMC was on all various ranking lists. And so first thing that struck me very much were things that struck me when I looked at where CMC landed on various lists, was that academic offerings, career opportunities in particular there seems to be a good number of rankings around maybe not career opportunities, but like placement and earning potential based on alumni and various things. There's a lot of subjectivity in that too, given what people want to do and different factors in their lives. But those are somewhat consistent things that you could look at from year to year for schools. But what stands out is location. And I think I saw something about weather, location, and campus life are so subjective. And I think there's rankings that really try, it seems like, to rank based on campus life. Like we're on one of the friendliest students. And I'm like, I think CMC students are very friendly, but like, so were all of the students that I worked with in my other two schools. So like to the point of like, how do you rank, 623 to 624? Like I don't even know how you rank 1 to 2 on something called being friendly, because it's so impossibly subjective. So those are things that, and location in the US, being on the West Coast, I talked to international students who are like way too far. And like, but you think, how did like LA, it's sometimes you're like, how hard is it? That's so that's undesirable to you, but like too far. East Coast only. I worked at a school in the Midwest. It's an ideal location for some students and a total no-go for many others. But then what you're doing is dismissing institutions that are top of academic ranking offerings or best in all these other criteria that might be important to you. So just to double down on the point, this can't be a deciding factor. This can't be the sole way in which you select a college. Campus life in particular, I think we probably all have a lot to say about how to best get that sense of community that you're looking for, that a ranking just, I think, is impossible to be able to do for you. So I'll stop there.
I'll just note, and somebody in the chat talked about this. I think, when I was applying for college eons ago, you do go with what you've heard, right? And if you're coming from a different country and you've not heard of anything other than Ivy League, for example, like it's hard to kind of, you're like, of course I'm going to the rankings because I just don't really know what I'm doing. And my mother actually said, hey, I think you should consider applying to Wellesley College. And at the time, as a 17-year-old on the West Coast in the Pacific Northwest, I had never heard of Wellesley. I didn't even know this concept of liberal arts college. And I was like, what is that? I said to my mom, what is that? And so I think, we resort to the rankings because we don't know. We just don't know. We don't know about the range of university. We don't know we don't know what we want to get out of it. We just know, oh, I'm supposed to go to college, and I'm supposed to get a good job. I think a lot of us, like at 17, that's kind of what we're thinking. Maybe some of you are more sophisticated than I was as a 17-year-old, and we want, you're like, I know what I want to study and I know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm still figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. But so
And Gloria,
yeah.
you mentioned the Ivies, and I love that you mentioned the Ivies because it brings a really interesting point about like how much do we actually value rankings versus just kind of like how much do we know at university or a college, right? And there's a comment in the chat here that is, like students have no ideas how to rank colleges because they know little about those universities, right? And what they want to get out of a university education. We all, we're three liberal arts colleges here that you may or may not have heard of before today. I can assume that 90 to 100% of the people in this room and in this webinar know Columbia University, and they know that it's one of the Ivies. It's in New York City. They know Columbia University. Maybe you knew this or you didn't know this, but Columbia University is actually in no rankings. It's not ranked. They stepped out of the rankings. You still would apply to Columbia University. You still would value it. You still know that it's a great university, right? Even while it is completely unranked. And I'm giving free promotion to Columbia here, even though they need it. But that just goes to show that like rankings or no rankings, it's about how you know a university and how you get to know it, right? Yes, rankings can be a starting point for you to go to a new university, but don't stop there because you can have an Ivy League also not being ranked, and you're still going to think it's one of the best universities in the country, if not in the world.
Thank you, Joe, for bringing that up. Yeah, so I think like if you're a counselor on the call, and you're wondering how to like help your students, admissions officers, like especially as a liberal arts college, this is your job, trying to figure out how to like let people know about what you provide and the experience. How would you give advice to a counselor? Like how do we help kids understand an experience, even though they're thousands of miles away and just have no sense of how to begin to think about that?
I find the silence funny because it's like there's a reason why we're on the admission side of the desk. You know what I mean? That is a hard it's a hard question. But yeah, I'll give my 2 cents, I guess. But sorry, it was just the silence was funny. Um, I guess what I'd say is that um I guess in terms of rankings in particular, I feel like we've touched on a lot of the ways that it can be used as a resource, and I think that it can be a good maybe starting point. I guess like it's interesting to be thinking about it in an international context because I think that coming from an American high school experience, it's very common to start the conversation not at, what are my grades necessarily, or starting at a rankings list. It's kind of like just starting with what did I like about high school so far? Did I enjoy my classes that were small, or was I seeking a larger experience? Do I feel like I'm very dead set on the career path that I want to pursue, or the even just the major that I want to pursue, or am I in a place where I'm not completely sure yet? And those can be kind of good starting points that can lead you in the direction of perhaps a liberal arts college, or realizing that a liberal arts college is not for you at all. I'm starting to see some questions about the choices between a liberal arts college and university in the chat. And I'll just briefly say, you don't have to exclusively apply to one or the other. We'll never find out that you applied to a different one. But yeah, I think that's where I'll start. Yeah.
I'll add to that, and thank you, Trey, for saying that we're not college counselors for a very specific reason. I admire the job that college counselors do in helping students understand where to go to college, and this also applies to students in the room and parents in the room that, definitely use the rankings. We're not saying not to use the rankings, right? We're not saying to stay away from it. We're not saying that they're untrue. We just think that there's a lot of context that the rankings just don't give you. And understanding that behind a number, there is a whole plethora of opinions, of rhetoric, of commentaries, of subjective mindsets, of fluctuating understandings of how we do rankings, right? As Jen noted earlier, there's criteria that was taken away from the rankings formula that was present a couple years ago that drastically changed how some colleges were in the rankings. A couple years ago, those colleges would have been seen super positively by some random number that was taken out of the equation. The college might not be seen as positively, right? But a college does not just bump down 20 spots from one year to another in reality, right? In real life, that does not happen, right? You still have a very average, like sort of balanced college experience, right? So understanding the context that's given to these rankings and understanding the depthness of these numbers is going to be something that I think that's your duty as a college counselor, right? To be able to let your students understand. And again, harping on my point earlier that you know your students better than anyone else, but you also know that your students, if they if they're part of the drive, if they are in the driver's seat, if they are leading their journey to education, they're going to be successful anywhere, right? And we haven't even mentioned sort of like within the college rankings, we haven't even mentioned community colleges, right? I know so many students who are so incredibly successful going to community college, and they become even more successful than many and many and many of the students who go to a regular 4-year university or liberal arts college, right? So just keeping all of that in mind, that your students can be successful anywhere so long as they are in the driver's seat.
I wanted to throw out, I know we only have a few more minutes, but obviously outcomes are really important, especially among this population, given that a lot of this population is not able to get financial aid or need covered. And so this is a big, big, big investment for their families. So when we think about outcomes, what are your thoughts about that? There are specific, you guys are liberal arts colleges, so people are always wondering, what are the outcomes of liberal arts colleges? Do they all have to go to graduate school? Is that the path for everyone? And so can you can you touch on, for you all, like what you see from a liberal arts education outcomes being, and that can include grad school or employment, and then any other kind of thoughts you have on that.
I can jump in. We actually saw that question and I love it. So no, not everyone goes straight to graduate school. Let's see, I'll try to speak generally first and then give you a little examples with CMC. But for I think at all liberal arts colleges have wonderful career services. They're named different things, but essentially what you're going to get at every liberal arts institution is personalized attention around your career exploration path. There are people hired and dedicated to supporting every single student in that small, intimate setting, much like the classroom. You can apply that to all departments offered at liberal arts colleges to have that dedicated attention starting your first year. So career offices are going to have first year programming that is around career exploration, really for students to understand early on what networks the college offers in terms of their alumni, their parents, internships and experiences and research that students have done in the past, that the institution has connections with organizations or students that have gone through and have positive experiences. Like this sense of networking, not just with the alumni, but what previous students have done, with companies and where these companies are understanding this is the quality of student we're getting. I think liberal arts students, institutions excel in that space because you're getting such a personalized attention on the campus experience. In the classroom, students are interacting with professors. And while that's a valuable experience for the student, intellectually and academically, you're also thinking about the social skills, the communication skills, the ability to converse across different opinions and perspectives. That happens on a daily basis for liberal arts students. That happens at every institution, but maybe not on a daily basis and maybe not in an intensive setting like it does at liberal arts colleges. So our students are set up to walk into a professional setting and really thrive, whether or not they're experts in that field. So I'll say CMC lands at one end. We send more of our students into the workforce and like 10 to 15% into graduate school straight out of undergrad. Graduate alumni will go on, 3, 5, 10 years down the road to other grad programs, but we tend to be on one side with liberal arts schools, more professional paths. And I will just a quick note, this might be true for my colleagues too, but our international students actually have slightly better outcomes than our domestic students. So higher earning salaries, job placement at higher rates than domestic students. So just a plug.
Anything to add, Trey or Joe?
I think Jen covered everything that I would have said in that conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Well, of course, the time is out. It's always like so crazy how quickly this hour goes. So you'll have to come back another time, friends, to ask more questions. I am going to share the screen so that you all have our contact information. If you have specific questions about these colleges, you want to know their exact employment rates, you can email them or go to their website. They do have lots of options for you to learn more about the school. One thing I didn't mention, I always mention on every Tuesday talk, is go find a current student, and ask them what mattered to them before and what matters them now. I think you'll find out that a lot of people shift when they discover kind of what the options are and the feeling and the vibe. Those things are really hard to measure, but talking to a current student would be great. And these people can direct you to great current students. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to stay online for a few minutes. If people have questions about initial view, I know some people have been like, hey, you do these Tuesday talks, but what do you actually do? So I'm happy to stay on here and answer questions for that if you'd like to stay, but I'm going to let my colleagues go because I think a couple of them might want to take a little nap before their workday starts. Thank you so much for taking time. Joe, Trey, Jen, so good to see you all, and everybody else. Thank you for joining Tuesday Talks. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all. I might take a nap too, actually. Not thinking about it. See you all.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, Jen. Okay, if anyone wants to ask questions about Initial View, I'm here. But you also can go and have a great evening. I know it's late for some of you. And I'll very quickly just kind of share. We are an interview platform. And so if you've never heard of Initial View before, we basically do interviews with students who are applying to college or boarding school or grad school. And it is a real live interviewer on the other side. You sign up for a time that works for you. It is one interview, one general interview that can be used for all of your colleges. And then there's a writing sample component that's 20 minutes. And then you can send that. You can actually watch it before you send it, but then you can send it to as many colleges as you want. And it is a great way for you to tell your story, and make sure that colleges understand your communication ability, your interactivity ability, but also some of the wonderful, unique things about your personality. So I'm here to answer questions. I know that some of you, this is the first time you've ever heard anything like that. Others, you've heard about Initial View many, many times, but you just have some specific questions. Feel free to type in the chat, and we'll go from there. And for those of you who are asking, we did record this session, and so you will be able to access that. We have, here, I'll type it in here, maybe. That link goes to our archive, so you can see all of the talks that we've done before. And that way, that's a good resource, I think, for people who haven't heard about kind of all the components of the college search process, and you're welcome to go there to find past recordings. A lot of the content is similar. Some of it has shifted. You know, we are in a shifting landscape with college admissions. So that's why I appreciate all of you continuing to tune in. All right. Any questions? Some of you are asking if there are any updates. There are not really updates. I mean, we continue to do interviews, and more colleges are happy to see them. I think, there's always this question, should I do the interview that the college offers, the admissions officer or alumni interviews, or should I do Initial View? And my answer is always do as many interviews as you can, because one, it's great practice. I mean, you will be interviewing for the rest of your life. Even if you end up at a same job for a decade, you're still interviewing on some level in getting a promotion, in leading a staff meeting, in social clubs or things like that. You will always need to be interviewing. So, obviously I say do them all. And they serve different purposes. So if you want to know more about the college, and then take the admissions interview or the alumni interview. A lot of those places who still offer those, they've actually changed the naming. For example, I think Penn calls them conversations, I think, like something like that, instead of interviews, which I've always said it's not an interview, it's a conversation. But it is an opportunity for you as a student to be asking about the college, ask about what they offer, and tell me more about the vibe, things like that. You're able to ask. With Initial View, we're not representatives of colleges, so you're not going to ask us questions. But that is the beauty of Initial View, is that time is yours. It is yours to share about who you are. And so it's a different experience. And because it's recorded, multiple people can watch it. And when multiple people watch it, that's actually a good thing for you, because they can advocate for you. People can advocate for you. They will listen to something that you say. And then when they are in that committee room deciding on candidates, they'll be like, oh, remember so-and-so mentioned that. And they can even play the video clip and make people realize, like, oh, that person is the person who loved biology, or that person is the person who grew up in a family of 10, something memorable. They can really advocate for you in committee. So I would say do both. but prioritize initial view because we have opportunities for everybody. A lot of times those alumni interviews run out. There's not enough interviewers. And at the end of the day, the alumni interview or the admissions interview, those are not recorded in video form for people to keep watching. And so then it's just based on one person's kind of report. And sometimes that doesn't show the whole conversation, and it doesn't give admissions officers much to go on other than just some written points. Any other questions? There's still quite a few of you on here, so you should ask a question. I think people always have the question like, how do I prepare? And my answer to you is have lots of conversations. In the same way as we were talking about preferences and rankings and priorities today, like I think a lot of times we don't know how to proceed because we haven't asked ourselves a question. And so the first step is to just like make a list of questions for yourself and for your friends. And that's hard. I will admit I have a senior and a junior, and this whole time that we've been walking through this process, I'm asking, well, what do you like? And like it's hard. Like sometimes we're so busy doing what we need to do that we're not thinking about what makes us happy, what makes us excited, or our motivation. Why do we do things? Well, I'm doing them because I keep getting a good grade, or I'm quite good at it. But, if we have to dig a little deeper, why do I want to do it? Why do I keep doing it? That becomes hard. And so it does require a little bit of self-reflection time. And as a junior, if you're a junior or you're counseling a junior, now is the time to start asking those questions. I know you feel the pressure of, no, now is the time that I have to do test prep. And now is the time that I have to like get my grades up. And yes, those are all things that are good for you. But at the end of the day, your success in your college experience will be impacted by kind of thinking through what is meaningful to you right now, because you might end up at a college that you thought, oh, it's rah rah and sounds amazing, and then it had none of the things that mattered to you. Or not none of the things, but fewer of the things that matter to you. So number one in preparation is figure out what is meaningful to you and what matters to you and the values that you hold. And then my second tip is to learn how to ask a follow-up question. And that is something that I tell my interviewers all the time. You have to ask a follow-up question. You can't just say, what's your favorite subject, and have them stop at math. Like there has to be a follow-up question. So for you, if you're preparing your students, like I always say, play the what's the follow-up question game, so ask a question and then you have them come up with a list of potential follow-up questions and see how quickly they can dive deeper into that topic. If you are a student and you ask that first level of follow-up question and you don't know how to dive deeper, then that is a good indication to you that either this is not a topic that is meaningful to me, or I really need the vocabulary or to figure out how to keep going. A lot of kids are really great at a subject, but then when we ask a follow-up question, they're just like, I don't know. I haven't done further research. Or I haven't asked myself why I want to do this. And so playing the follow-up question is great. That's a great way to kind of prepare. Other questions? Okay, pitfalls. Pitfalls are okay. You have to remember that the interview is in context of the whole application. So sometimes in an interview, people kind of want to just mention all the things that they already mentioned on their application. And so it comes out a little bit scripted and listy. And listy, what I mean by listy is like people are like, I must talk about these 5 things, these 5 achievements in my life. And that is the pitfall. students come in with a very kind of curated list of what they really, really want to talk about, and then they don't listen anymore. So I would say, you know, the self-reflection piece is super important. You got to write down and you got to think through, however you do it, type notes on your phone, journal, bullet journaling, really kind of write down the list, but then you're kind of throwing that away and you're thinking about stories that are attached to these. Don't talk about the same story that you already wrote about in your essay. I mean, you can have things that correlate, but they don't need to be the exact same because the admissions officer is reading your essay. So they already know a specific story. But if you know, those essays are only anywhere between like 200 words to 600 words, 650 words. So I know that sometimes you can't go in the depth of them. And so you want to kind of be able to know the story so that you can give a little bit more color and detail, but don't read. That is like now that we have technology and you can have like something right here behind your webcam to read, it just never goes well. And every year we have many students who try to read or memorize even. And the interviewers, they feel like, oh no, as soon as the kid goes into that kind of memorization mode, it is hard because they're not listening to the question anymore. There's not interactivity. And I will say that a lot of times the interview is not so much about the words that you say, but it's much more about the vibe, you know, like were they listening? Did they have soft skills? You know, did they ask a clarifying question? These things actually show what you might be like in the classroom. And at the end of the day, the reason for kind of beyond those metrics that we talked about, like, can they do the work? Sure. Did they get good scores? Great. But beyond that, they're looking for community members, and community members need to contribute somehow. So they want to see how you contribute. Now, I'll say the second like pitfall is not actually within the interview. It is the thoughts that come up. Should I do the interview? Many people say to me, my student is an introvert and very shy, so they shouldn't do this. And I just want to debunk that. Like, no, no, no. Some of my favorite interviews in all of the history of Initial View are with quiet, shy, introverted people. And the reason is because they're not doing a presentation in front of a big crowded room. They're not at a party. They are just with one person online. And they're thoughtful. You're contributing to the community without having to be loud. And you are talking about something much more deeply, much more intellectually. There are ways that you can shine in this without needing to be someone who loves to talk. So I will just add that to the mix of pitfalls. Don't fall into the trap of, I'm not a good talker, so I shouldn't come on this. This is a way for you to reveal your true self to admissions offices, and they do want to build a community of people that are not all the same. All right. Well, I'm going to 2 more minutes. Any other questions? If you are offering a mock interview, here's the thing. Maybe offer to do mock interview. I wonder if the counselors can like share people. I will say that it's hard to do a mock interview when you're so close to the student. Because like, for example, I can't really do a mock interview with my son, right? Because we're just going to start derailing or laughing or being awkward, or it's just like, you know, my son would probably be like, no one's going to ask me that, you know? So it is hard to do a mock interview with someone you know. You know, one thing that we did in this season is that we found a friend who our kids didn't know. and asked if they would be willing to do a mock interview with our kid. And that's a lot of effort and work, but it is helpful because there is something about talking to an adult stranger, and it helps you kind of understand um, how to approach the interview, any interview. So that's a recommendation. If you don't have that, we do offer a junior interview, which is just basically a practice. It's the full thing. You practice the writing sample as well, and you get to like learn how to use the platform and figure out the technology. All of those things are kind of important now in this day and age. Being able to like figure out your webcam, figure out the lighting, make sure that your sound is working. All of that is great. So we do offer that. If you want to book one of those, now would be a great time. Spring of junior year is the popular time to book a junior interview. One little perk that you get from doing that is that we do have someone record a short video afterwards to kind of give you a little bit of feedback on how you did. And that feedback is subjective, but it is great feedback. And that would be my final piece of advice. Ask for feedback. We always think that we got this or we know what we're like, and ask for feedback. And we are in a great time of technology where you can record yourself. I'm recording this conversation right now, and then I will have it available. And every time I watch it, I will be like, oh no, why did I do that? But it's good to learn and good to see. And again, that reflection piece is super important. And so, you know, that's my final piece of advice. Ask for feedback and be open to it, and you'll continue to get better. Fantastic. Well, thank you for all of you who kept hanging out with me. It's great to see your names on the Zoom list. And we will be taking a short little break because there's a lot of travel happening for a lot of admissions officers. I myself am going to Korea and China in the next couple weeks. But we will reconvene probably at the end of the month. So keep your eyes peeled for the next Tuesday talks, and I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, day, wherever you are.